Good evening. Tonight I thought I'm going to talk about the valve clearance compensating elements and the thrust pieces. There's a fellow up in Canada who is rebuilding his car, and he was getting to the point where he needed to determine if he needed which thrust pieces he needed, whether or not he had the correct thrust pieces installed in his redone overhauled heads. And it came to the point where we were talking about the check gauge, and he didn't want to spend the money on it, and I had bought one, a Baum tool one for $110. And ironically, I was looking for it to see the dimension on this, and interestingly enough, I couldn't find it. I got so many tools and everything else. I had put this Baum tool away somewhere in a safe place so I would find it when I needed it. And as it goes in this life, that's exactly then the place you can't remember where it's at. So one day when I clean up and move things, I'm probably going to find it. Anyway, on some of the websites, like I think it was bensworld.org or something like this, I have read I've read that people were confused about the manual. We're looking here at Group 5, Chapter 213. That is this one here, which deals with checking the hydraulic compensating elements for proper clearance or zero position, basically when the cam is all the way up. This would be this picture here, and here on the right hand side you can see the tool on how it actually sits on there. Let me see if we can zoom this in a little bit. You can see the cam is on top, so it is in the fully closed position. The spring has now pushed up the rocker arm, basically, or the arm, and the element is basically at its lowest point at this point, the guiding point. And this is basically the position we want to test. And Mercedes-Benz has a actual test tool, which I'm going to show you. You can see this here in this picture. It has that pin which moves up and down with the plus and the minus on it to see whether the compensating elements are correct. And in this manual you will find a statement, and it says here, since December 1982, the hydraulic valve clearance compensating elements are adjusted with a revised preload dimension, basic position, previously 0.7 to 1.9 millimeters, now 1.2 to 2.4 millimeters. This is achieved by adding a thicker thrust piece to the valve spring retainer. And the production breakpoint for this is these engine numbers here, which you can see, and the model numbers, and then the chassis number and the engine number. Now this was done in 1982. If your car is older than 1982, you really don't have to worry about this. This is basically the 450 SLC, and you know, the 107 V8s, they were affected by this, you know, those cars. The 3.5 liter engine, 4.5 liter engine, and 5.0 liter engines, mostly with cast iron bodies, engine blocks. With the aluminum blocks, this change basically happened here. Now, this would be of a concern if you have any of the older vehicles, say like anything pre-December 1982. When you look at your B column on your driver's side door, it will tell you the months and the year your car was manufactured. If it is prior December 1982, then you have to deduct out of your measurement, you have an offset of 0.5 millimeters when you're using the new test tool. If you have a very, very old test tool prior to this date, then you will have to add plus 0.5 millimeters. But it isn't so far irrelevant, and I will tell you why. Checking and adjusting, this is down here. should be carried out with the testing gauge 117 58906 2300 with revised measuring groove positions. Now, what happened here is this measuring groove, I will show you this in a second, has moved, is now at 1.2 millimeters, and it was before at 0.7 millimeter. Now the big question is coming from where? Where do you actually measure this? Well, here's what we got. First of all, we do have a brand new 117 58906 2300 in the house with compliments from Stuttgart. This was manufactured on March the 2nd, 2021. So not even a year ago. And this is the piece in question. This is what this tool looks like. You have your plus and your minus. And you can see this on top here. This is actually the position where we're going to look at this, where this is at. And you can see this has a pin here. And what this means is that this pin here used to be a 0.5 millimeter shorter. So this whole thing was actually recessed further down. And then I got another unit of eBay, and this is exactly the same as the Mercedes-Benz. Not as nice, but it works. So I gotta, so you can actually take this out. This is some fellow made this, and he did a pretty good job. I guess he had a lathe and he machined this himself, and he put it up on eBay, and I think I paid $35 or $40 for it. Now let me show you this here. I got as a little bullet, and we're gonna set this on here. And now we can zoom in, and we will see that this is just about a 0.5 millimeter below what I got here set up. This is pure coincidence with the height of the bullet and that little nail file I got underneath it, but I wanted to show you this. Now if I take this and I put the other unit on here, you will see that they're both indicating slightly below the measuring line on top here. So this means these are, even though this is homemade here, let me see if I can zoom out a little bit. Yeah, I had to put that box with the crackers behind it for the focus. That this is a homemade device. It is exactly the same measuring position. So for anyone who has a car made past or after 1982, either one of these two tools here will work for you. They will work just fine, and they have the correct height for what you need. And if you use them on a pre-December 1982 V8, then they will slightly be off because the thrust plates in there are gonna be a little bit smaller. And the difference is what we're talking about is a 0.5 millimeter. Now, when they're saying the 1.2 millimeters to 1.4, I can show you this better here, would be the left line would be a 0.5 millimeter further down, and then from there you would measure 1.2 millimeters up. This is it. So it indicated that at a slightly lower, that means the thrust plates were a little bit thinner by a 0.5 millimeter what they did, and they increased the thrust plates. So you have to know, if you have one of the older cars, you are probably aware of this. If you don't know this, then you know this now. And anyone who has a vehicle after December 1982, you don't have to worry about it. It will show you this, of what you actually need to see, whether you have to adjust or increase or decrease the thickness of your thrust plate. We just zoom in here. I like the Mercedes-Benz one the best, and the reason why is because you have the red mark, so you can really nicely see this. So if you're up here, basically, then you need to decrease it because you got too much, it's too far up. And if it is down here, then you have to increase it, and that's what that basically means, the plus side. If it goes up, that means you're decreasing the thrust plate. You have to get a smaller thrust plate. And if it goes down, then you have to increase the thrust plate. That's basically the whole science behind this. It's a real simple measurement, and ideally you want to be in the middle of the two, about here. But usually, because it is a very narrow range you have, this is 1.2 millimeter range, and that range has not changed. Only the position used to be lower on the other unit, and that indicates that it was smaller, the thrust piece, if you would compare this here with the new one. And that is, like I said, is the offset is a 0.5 millimeter lower than what this unit here is. And if you go up, say like if you're at the lower edge or below, then you want to decrease the size of the thrust plate. You go to the next size down. And if you're up here, right here, then you want to increase the thrust plate. And I had shown this in one of my other videos some time ago. And let me just see, we zoom back out. And the thrust plates are listed here. So what you do is you remove the thrust plate, you measure it, and then you look at this. Do I have to increase the thrust plate or do I have to decrease it? Say like I have 5.1 millimeters in my car on all 16 elements, and then when I do the test now, I will either have to change it to 4.75 or to 5.45. And so I will have to order these. It is highly unlikely that you have to go 2 steps up. If it is that far out that you would have to increase this by 2, then you probably want to replace the compensating element and take a look at the rocker arm itself to see if they're still good or not. But that's basically on how this works. So you measure out your current plate where you took the measurement with here, and then you see if it shows you a plus, you're going up. That means you have to go to 5.45. If it shows you a minus, you go with 4.75. That would be for my case, depending on where your current plates are. It could be possible, but that would be very rare, and that means your engine is very worn out or the heads are worn out. Is if you have to go 2 steps up to get back into the middle or 2 steps down. That is possible, but then, you know, you may want to think about it. If the gap or the jump is that big, it's usually 1 plate higher or lower, next number up or down. If you get 2 numbers or even 3, then you really should be redoing your heads and rebuilding them. And that's basically where that is at. Now, some people wanted to know to make their own tools. Is I cannot give you this measurement because this is protected. This is a Mercedes-Benz part and it's copyrighted, so I cannot copy the dimension for this here. But we can do it with this one here. And if someone is interested of knowing of what the distance is from the left mark to here, and from the top here to the bottom here, then you can basically, I can measure that out for you. And if you need to make the tool for the older one, then this lower mark here would move down by a 0.5 millimeter, and then you have a 1.2 millimeter gap. The 1.2 millimeter gap is very important, and it has to be quite accurate. So that is with these, what do they call them? The check gauge or Prüflehre. In German, it's Prüflehre. That's something I just wanted to show you real quick tonight on how this actually works. For the compensating element test and the adjustment of the thrust pieces. On the other hand, I was surprised that Mercedes-Benz was able to send me a brand new made check gauge, and you cannot get the old shocks anymore for the hydraulic suspension unit, for the self-leveling suspension. They don't really have been discontinued, but they have no more stock. And that was something I talked to Mercedes-Benz here in America about yesterday. And with the conversation I had with Bosch is that the on the ABS units, I had mentioned that in the other video about the Bosch ABS, is that Mercedes-Benz went to Bosch, their purchasing department in Stuttgart, and they had put in a request for an X amount of units they wanted to buy. And then Bosch came back and they said, this is not enough quantity for us to make a production run. So the companies, Sachs with the shocks, Bosch with a lot of parts, they're telling Mercedes-Benz now that their numbers they're asking for to put parts on the shelf, replacement parts, are too low, and it is not worthwhile for Bosch to make such a small production run of these units. They probably don't have the capacity, or all of that capacity is in the middle, Far East somewhere, or in Eastern Europe, and they cannot get that squeezed in, or that doesn't work out. So it's an issue of minimum order quantity. And that sounds very Chinese, because if you have ever been on Alibaba, not Alibaba Express, but on Alibaba, then you know that the Chinese always put a minimum order production run, a minimum order purchasing quantity for purchasing on there. And this is sort of what you have in Germany too. So Mercedes-Benz did not cave in and say, well, we wanted to buy 100 ABS units, but Bosch wanted to sell us 1,000, or they need 1,000 to make a production run. Then Bosch said, well, then Mercedes said, we're going to discontinue the part. So this is really the part situation with parts which are NLA at this point. Any parts Mercedes-Benz can get where the manufacturer, the original equipment manufacturer, is willing to do a smaller production run, they will be available for quite some time. Those parts which you have NLA, that's where Mercedes-Benz wanted to purchase a smaller quantity than what the minimum order quantity was for that part from the manufacturer. I just wanted to throw this in for clarification. Not that you think that the people over at Mercedes-Benz, they just discontinue something because they don't like something. It has become a question of demand. There is still a lot of 126s out there. Not as many V8s compared to the 6 cylinders and especially diesels. But there's probably, I would think, at V8s, there must be probably worldwide 50,000, 100,000 at a bare minimum left running at this point. And the other problem is with people like with the self-leveling hydraulic suspension system is that the pumps go out and they don't want to repair the pumps. The pump repair is best done with the mandrel, like my friend Martin made me to put the front seal in. And my pump hasn't leaked since I overhauled it with a mandrel. It has been working perfectly. And I've been thinking about getting new shocks, just to put them on the shelf. And I find out that they're no longer available. Now some guy on eBay is selling them remanufactured for, I think, $1,900. I almost felt backwards over. The last time I bought the Sachs Mercedes-Benz rear shocks for the self-leveling suspension, they were $225 a piece. By the time now when they ran out of them, it was $275 a piece. So you're going from $550 a set to $1,900. That is insane, if you ask me. We will see in which direction this is gonna go. The same issue now with the oil pump for the V8s. They're also out. There's no more oil pumps available at this point. And we're going to see this more and more. I'm trying to get in touch with a friend of mine who is actually in their marketing department over in Stuttgart. He is the sales manager for Mercedes-Benz Scandinavia. and I will see if I can send him an email, and if he can get me in touch with the purchasing people in Stuttgart for the 126 group to see if who is actually dealing with this. And then I'm going to see if I can give them a call and have a little talk with them and get some more ideas of what they think on how they want to do it, to keep the parts supply going on this with these minimum orders, what they're looking at, which is going to affect us negatively. I have several contacts over at Bosch, and I know from experience that that comes from the top down with these minimum order. It is usually associated with a euro or dollar value for the order itself, for the part, and they're looking at this, and then whatever they have, what have you, and that's how that is determined. And Bosch is very, very stringent with this. They like parts which sell in big quantities. They like big numbers. It's a large corporation. Bosch is very big, and they need big volume. That is a volume manufacturer. They're not a specialty small type, small production run thing. When they do something, it usually is pretty big in numbers. This is something I just wanted to throw in here as so you have some ideas of what's going on here. I will be reporting on this. I've also got a information together on CAN bus. More stuff to come for the 140 primarily, and how this actually works with the pulse test units on the 140s, the earlier models, and the CAN bus, on how this is checked, and the actual serial communication they have for the 3-digit codes. On these very early models, say like from 92 until 98 or 99, that also affects the 202 and the, what was the other one, the R129, and I believe the E-Class too, the 124, which was then later incorporated. So if you're interested in these type of models and the diagnostics, the electronic diagnostics, and how this works and what you can do, I probably will prepare a video. This is going to be a long video too, just an introduction to this, on how the testing is actually completely done, and what test equipment you will need to properly test that. And then I will reference this to the appropriate Mercedes-Benz diagnostic manual you can probably find online to purchase, or get it from Mercedes-Benz. And I will introduce that to you as a viewer, and then you can get a head start in terms of properly diagnosing these vehicles from 1992 on until pretty much 2000. After that, it all becomes OBD2, and there's enough test equipment out there. So it is primarily the 90s models which we're going to be talking about. And with that, you have a great evening.